Today we celebrate the 10th Sunday in Ordinary Time. The Tibetan Buddhist Nobel Peace Prize winner and leader Dalai Lama, in his advice for a good life, once spoke of the need to practice the 3 R's: respect for self, respect for others, and responsibility for all your actions. I spoke with a person recently who retired and was finding it difficult to transition into the phase of the life of retirement. She did not know what to do with all her free time on her hands and was beginning to make poor choices, leading her down a path of self-destruction. God placed humans above the rest of creation in the book of Genesis and endowed man with freedom and intelligence and reason, that he might freely give glory and praise to his Creator. God poured out through his sheer goodness on the first man, Adam, and God wanted him to cooperate with his grace. There in the Garden of Eden, God asked Adam, "Where are you?" This question is the heart of all biblical revelations. Where are you? God never loses sight of any of us. He seeks and he searches for us. God intended that we would walk in harmony in the garden with him. Adam and Eve were given an option to exercise their freedom of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But they disobeyed God. They violated their freedom and ate of the forbidden fruit and had to accept the consequences and the responsibilities for their actions. Adam and Eve did not escape scot-free. The consequences of their actions drove them out of paradise. Adam and Eve ate of the forbidden fruit, and that has been transmitted through original sin that was committed by our first parents since the beginning of history, and is communicated by means of generation to every human being who comes into this world. Original sin is a sin of pride. This primary and first disobedience turned into solidarity with sin and set us at odds with God's intention, God's plan, God's will, and God's purpose. Sin is disobedience, it's separation, it's alienation from God. One has wandered away. We often remark that one has lost the way. One tries to be God rather than to follow God. One alone determines the right way. God determines it, not human beings. Humans do not determine what is right or what is wrong. Humans do not determine reality. We are all sinners, and through the grace of baptism, we have been washed clean from our inherited stains of our first parents of original sin. And yet the residue, the filth of concupiscence, unholy, unruly desires and passions remain in each of us that must be controlled and conquered through God's grace and the right use of our freedom. St. Paul time and time again spoke of our freedom and the obligation to fulfill our Christian duties and responsibilities. Each one of us daily can freely follow the way of Jesus, or we can walk away from it. Paul was a persecutor, an enemy of Christians, but through God's amazing grace, 3 times in the Acts of the Apostles, we hear of his great conversion. Paul saw the light and became an apostle to the Gentiles and the Jews alike. Paul didn't point the finger of blame to God or to others. He took responsibilities for his poor choices, and he made amends. The blame game is as old as the mountains, where one says someone else is to blame, or the devil made me do it. or it's not my fault. These are phrases that are common on the lips of people who are irresponsible and immature, where one passes the buck. It's a dangerous habit to easily follow into. The blame game gets us nowhere in life, where one accuses and scapegoats and shames and blames others for things that happen in their lives. The devil is often called the accuser and the scatterer in the Bible. We all try to protect our fragile egos. We're all sinners, and we get seasick often. St. Paul admits his wrongs. He received God's forgiveness, and he committed himself to a life of true discipleship. Jesus, at the start of his public ministry, is engaged in a battle with the power of Beelzebul, a Canaanite divine name for the prince of demons. The Gospel of St. Mark begins with a snippet that is unique to St. Mark's Gospel. Jesus' own relatives come to him and say, "He is out of his mind." Hardly an image that we would think of Jesus' own family saying. Even his own relatives are miffed and baffled and think that Jesus has lost it. Do we chastise our family? Do we create divisions in our own household? Jesus drives out the enemy by speaking of God's will. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Whoever is obedient to the great commandment to love God and to love our neighbor is a member of Jesus' household. Jesus' vision of love is one of nonviolence, forgiveness, overcoming evil with goodness, turning the other cheek, swallowing hatred with mercy and compassion. Jesus undoes the tyranny of the tactics of Satan, the accuser, and the scatterer. Each of us is responsible for his or her choices before the living God. Before God, we can hide nothing. Do we have active respect and concern for others through the art of loving? Or are we off course on our own narcissistic, self-destructive journey? Do we truly act as a member of God's family by seeking to do his will, whatever the cost, whatever the price? The same question that God asked Adam, he asks us today. Where are you? Are you close to God, or are you a million miles away from God? Being a member of God's family is life's greatest blessing. May we cherish it daily.